and the Russians. We have Fox team coverage tonight. John Roberts is at the White House with the administration's view of the proceedings. We start off, though, this hour with Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge, who's been on Capitol Hill in the briefing room all day. Good evening, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Brett. Throughout the powerful testimony, the Attorney General tried to set the record straight.
The suggestion that I participated in any collusion, that I was aware of any collusion with the Russian government, is an appalling and detestable lie.
Testifying before the Senate Intelligence Committee, the Attorney General Jeff Sessions defended himself and the Trump administration over allegations they colluded with Russia. On his March decision to recuse himself from the ongoing probe, Sessions said it was not about Russia but his position on the campaign and regulations that forbid his involvement, a claim challenged by a senior Democrat.
Mr. Comey said that there were matters with respect to the recusal that were problematic and he couldn't talk about them. What are they?
Why don't you tell me? There are none, Senator Wyden. There are none. I can tell you that for absolute certainty. You tell, this is a secret innuendo being leaked out there about me, and I don't appreciate it.
Sessions insisted he never misled Congress over his contacts with the Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak.
My answer was a fair and correct response to the charge as I understood it.
Sessions said he met with the Russian ambassador in July and September, but not in April of last year at Washington's Mayflower Hotel, as widely reported.
You never remember having a conversation or a meeting with Ambassador Kislyak?
I do not.
And there was, in that event, was there ever a private room setting that that you were involved in?
No.
With
other than the reception area that was shut off from, I guess, the main crowd, a couple of dozen, 2 to 3 dozen people.
This one didn't pop into your memory?
Well, I guess I could say that I possibly had a meeting, but I still do not recall it, and I did not in any way fail to record something in my testimony or in my subsequent letter intentionally false.
Sessions appeared before the same Senate panel where the fired FBI Director James Comey described a mid-February meeting alleging he was pressured by the president to end the investigation into former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn. The president disputes Comey's account.
General Flynn at that point in time was in legal jeopardy. I don't think it's for me to say whether the conversation I had with the president was an effort to obstruct. I took it as a very disturbing thing, very concerning.
Sessions said Comey never shared that conversation, but urged Sessions not to leave him alone, again with the president.
You never asked Director Comey what took place in that meeting?
What I do recall is that I did depart. I believe everyone else did depart, and Director Comey was sitting in front of the president's desk, and they were talking.
It did appear that Mr. Comey felt that the conversation was improper.
He was concerned about it. And his recollection of what he said to me about his concern is consistent with my recollection.
Also today, Fox News confirming that a Columbia Law School professor who acted as an intermediary between James Comey and a New York Times reporter sharing information from memos that documented Comey's conversations with the president. That law school professor is providing what's described to us as relevant material to the special counsel Robert Mueller. Brett.
Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's find out what the president is doing right now and the reaction to today's testimony. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts has that part of the story tonight. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. The president is trying hard to stick with the agenda, talking health care with senators in a lunch in the cabinet room earlier today. Now in the Midwest, pushing his workforce development agenda, but all the time keeping one eye on the goings-on on Capitol Hill.
White House sources tell Fox News they were happy about the Attorney General's testimony today, saying, quote, he has been impressive and has forcefully been pushing back against insinuations of wrongdoing, in particular going hard against Senators Wyden and Heinrich. For his part, President Trump seemed wholly unconcerned with events unfolding on Capitol Hill today, meeting in Wisconsin with more what he describes as victims of Obamacare, then focusing his attention on the millions of jobs left open because workers lack the skills to fill them. Before he left the White House, though, the president made known what he thinks is the important issue in all of this, tweeting, quote, Attorney General Lynch made law enforcement decisions for political purposes, gave Hillary Clinton a free pass and protection, totally illegal. The president was also taking fire today for a statement made by a friend of his, Newsmax CEO Chris Ruddy, who suggested President Trump was considering the removal of special counsel Robert Mueller.
I think he's considering perhaps terminating the special counsel.
The statement prompted front-page headlines and outrage from Democrats.
I don't think that Congress would sit still and allow the president to pick his own investigator. Mueller is widely respected by people on both sides of the aisle, and we've heard a lot of members speak out about him since he was selected that he was the perfect choice.
Testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee today, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who appointed Mueller, said any demand to fire him would have to pass a high bar.
Senator, I'm not going to follow any orders unless I believe those are lawful and appropriate orders. Under the regulation, Special Counsel Mueller may be fired only for good cause. If there were not good cause, it wouldn't matter to me what anybody says.
The Speaker of the House also weighed in.
All I've heard so much are rumors, but I think in the best case for the president is to be vindicated by allowing this investigation to go on thoroughly and independently.
But the president's legal team is throwing cold water on the claim, telling Fox News Ruddy got his information by watching a member of the team, Jay Sekulow, on ABC's This Week, and misinterpreted what he said.
I can't imagine that issue is going to arise, but that again is an issue that the president with his advisors would discuss if there was a basis.
Today, Ruddy sought to clarify his comments.
I did not talk to the president about the issue. I do not believe he will fire him. I think if they did fire, it would be a mistake. I do believe he has the legal right to do it. I do believe it was considered as an option.
Sources tell Fox News President Trump was upset about the firestorm Ruddy ignited and dispatched his communications team to get the clarification. And the president took aim at the press for not checking its facts, tweeting, quote, "Fake news is at an all-time high. Where is their apology to me for all of the incorrect stories?"
With the Sessions hearing now complete, the White House is hoping to get the president's agenda above the tree line. In addition to health care, he's also got a big Cuba policy announcement coming up later on this week. And on health care, some breaking news from Capitol Hill. The president held that luncheon today, Brett. The Associated Press is reporting that to senators, the president referred to the House version of the American Health Care Act as, quote, mean, that the Senate could do better. We haven't been able to confirm the mean part, but one source on Capitol Hill did tell Fox News that the president thought that the Senate could be, quote, more generous in its version of the health care bill. Brett?
John Roberts live on the North Lawn. John, thank you. Let's get a reaction to what we saw today and that meeting at the White House. Talk about what's ahead in the Senate as well. South Dakota's John Thune is Republican Conference Chairman in the Senate. Senator, thanks. Well, let's start with where John left off.
Okay.
Was the president, did he say mean about the House bill?
Well, what I would characterize him as saying is that he thinks that the Senate can improve upon the House bill, and that he likes the fact that the Senate is writing their own version. And what I think he conveyed to us was a sense of urgency, the need to get this done, and I think he has his ideas about what it might look like, but I think right now he's kind of deferring to us, and frankly that's a good thing. We're doing our best to come up with a good bill.
Put on the specifics, the quote, mean.
Well, I'm not going to confirm anything that the president did or didn't say with respect to either the House bill or the Senate process. But what I will say is he does believe, and I think we can improve upon the House product. They built a good foundation, and I think we can make that stronger and better, and get a bill that is more workable for the American people and more affordable.
Well, can we talk about the specifics? I mean, are you going to make it more generous, more kind, as quoted here?
Well, I think what we think is important, one, that we stabilize, provide stability to the markets, which are collapsing. I mean, there are more and more counties, and the reports are out now that this next year 45% of the counties in the country will have 1 or 0 options in the individual marketplace. So stabilize the marketplace. Secondly, address skyrocketing premiums. My state of South Dakota, for example, since 2013 has seen a 124% increase, doubled in the amount of premiums that are being paid. Third, protect people with pre-existing conditions. And fourth, make Medicaid sustainable for the future by giving states more flexibility, and at the same time protect people that need it, to not pull the rug out from under them. Those are the objectives in this, and I think we can achieve that in the Senate bill.
So before the 4th of July, do you think there's going to be something that moves forward?
I think that that's still a plan, and obviously, we're doing our best right now to take all these great ideas, and our entire Republican Senate has been operating as a committee of the whole, basically meeting together several times a week and trying to distill the issues, the decision points, narrow the differences that we have. I think we can get there, but if we don't get it before the 4th of July, for sure in the month of July, and we need to get this done. We need to get this behind us, but do it in a way, the right way, that addresses the concerns the American people have right now about a failed system. We want to rescue them from that.
Here's the Senate Minority Leader on this process.
Make no mistake, there will be a reckoning if this bill is passed. Passing a bill of this scale, with so many consequences for the American people, without telling them what's in it, without telling them how they would fare, the political retribution will be swift. It will be a catastrophe for the Republican Party.
It is fairly rich, Senator. I mean, you had Nancy Pelosi saying you had to pass Obamacare before you knew what was in it in that one speech. But now it seems that senators are being put to the test the same way. I mean, we haven't seen any language yet, and I don't think a lot of senators have seen a lot of language. Is that true?
Right. No, and that's true. I mean, right now staff is drafting it, but what we have done is we have agreed in principle on kind of what the issues are, and now we're reducing that to legislative language, trying to work with the Congressional Budget Office, figure out what the impacts are going to be, how the CBO is going to score this. But in the end, we know we have to get this across the finish line. But it's not like there haven't been hearings on this. There have been multiple hearings over the years, and we've been studying these issues for 8 years and talking about these issues. This issue's probably been more litigated publicly than anything in this city for the last 8 years. So we know what the issues are. So what Senator Schumer is saying is just completely inaccurate. People are well aware of what we need to fix, and we're trying to systematically come up with a plan that's more workable and better for the American people.
Is there a sense that if you don't get the cats herded here around health care, that you vote on it and you abandon it and you come back to it later and move on to tax reform? I mean, is that the plan?
Well, I think that, one, we're going to have a vote, and two...
One way or another?
One way or the other. And two, we need to get 50 votes. I mean, and plus the vice president and the chair in order to get this thing done. Because if we don't, I think it makes it much more difficult to do tax reform and the other things that are on our agenda.
Because the $900 billion plus that comes out of health care.
And we need to save it. I mean, this thing is collapsing, Brett. That's why there's a sense of urgency for the American people about getting this right. These insurance markets are collapsing by the day. And secondly, I think there's a huge political price to be paid if we don't. We made a commitment to the American people. We need to honor it. And the Senate's got to do its part of the job now, and then we'll have to reconcile our differences with the House and eventually get a bill on the President's desk that he can sign into law that will be hopefully a vast improvement over the government-run system that we have today.
So you're not one of the senators who says, you know, listen, it's the Democrats' deal, let the thing collapse, and then work with them to fix it. You're saying it's the Republicans' ownership, since you control the House, the Senate, and the White House.
Well, the Democrats created the mess. I mean, we have to fix their mess. This is you know, they started and created this system of you know, government-run health care, which has been a failure for the American people. But our responsibility now is to try and fix that mess. And so I don't think we let it collapse. I think that we need to step in and do the right thing for the American people, and that is give them more choices, more options, more competition, a health care system, and insurance coverage that actually works for them and that they choose, as opposed to having the government dictate from here in Washington, D.C. what that should be.
Level of confidence that there's a vote before July 4th break?
I would say that's probably, if I were making odds, it's 50-50. But, you know,
level of confidence that you're going to pass something to go to conference committee.
And that if it's not before the 4th of July, after the 4th of July, I'm confident. The odds are better than even, in my view, because I think we have to. And I think if we don't, we'll have let down the American people. This is what they elected us to do.
I know you didn't see all the Attorney General Sessions hearing, but you kind of read up on it and were briefed on it. Your sense of this investigation, where it's heading, and what we're learning?
Well, first off, I think the thing that came out of the hearing today, and basically Attorney General Sessions said this, is there haven't been any conversations that suggest there's any evidence anywhere that there was collusion with the Russians by the Trump campaign. Now, it's been reiterated. It's, you know, Director Comey said that, and there's been an FBI investigation underway for 11 months, a congressional investigation underway for 6 months now. There isn't any scintilla of evidence yet that that happened. At some point, I think we have to say, okay, enough already. it's time to move on. And I'm for one who believes that the special counsel ought to be able to do their thing and investigate this, but there ought to be at least some amount of time in which they conduct that and make sure that they stay in their lanes, and that this gets done in a way that brings us to a conclusion one way or the other. But let's don't drag this thing out forever, because I will tell you, when you get outside this city, where I know we're very obsessed with this, people across the country, they want us to focus on the agenda that's important to them. That's jobs in the economy, fixing health care, creating a tax code that makes us more competitive in the global marketplace, doing something on infrastructure, making sure the country's safe. I mean, those are the things that the American people are talking about right now.
And you're convinced that the Trump agenda can get back on track?
I am, and I think that, frankly, I think the president being out there, is in Wisconsin today, arguing for why we need to do these things is important, and we're going to continue to work here in the Senate on these issues, knowing that there are these things, sometimes distractions that are created out there, but we have to multitask. We have some big things to get done on the agenda, and I think high expectations by the American people that we want to meet.
Senator, we appreciate the time.
Thanks, Brett. Nice to be with you.
A story that could lead the news any other day. An American held prisoner in North Korea since January of last year is on his way home tonight, but he's hardly free. The release comes as basketball player turned reality TV star turned unofficial diplomat Dennis Rodman makes his 5th trip to the communist nation. Correspondent Benjamin Hall has the latest on that tonight.
Otto Warmbier, the 22-year-old UVA student held in North Korean jail, was released this morning, and North Korea acknowledged he's in a coma. President Trump has been regularly updated on Warmbier's ordeal since coming to office, but the North Korean regime kept his condition a secret, and the U.S. only found out last week after North Korea granted Swedish emissaries visitation rights. The U.S. immediately demanded his release and sent a rare delegation to Pyongyang to get him. He's now on a medical plane back to Ohio. In March 2016, Warmbier was accused of trying to steal a poster from his hotel and sentenced to 15 years hard labor after giving a teary confession, which many believe was under duress.
But I'm only human.
Ever since then, his parents have worked hard for his return.
Otto, we love you. You're an amazing guy. Hang in there, Tiger Boy. You're coming home.
At his trial, he was visibly shaky, and we now know he fell critically ill shortly afterwards, apparently coming down with a case of botulism. Unbeknownst to his family, he's been in a coma ever since. Today, Secretary Tillerson shared few details.
The President's direction, the Department of State has secured the release of Otto Warmbier from North Korea. He is on his way en route home to be reunited with his family.
This news comes on a day that Dennis Rodman, the controversial NBA star, flew to Pyongyang, a rare, high-profile visit to the country by a man who calls dictator Kim Jong-un a friend for life. Mobbed by journalists en route, he said that he was going to open doors, and that President Trump was probably pleased.
Well, I'm pretty sure he's pretty much happy at the fact that I'm over here, trying to accomplish something that we both need.
North Korea continues to provoke the U.S., testing numerous missiles in rapid succession amid threats of nuclear attacks. The administration yesterday called the regime the most urgent and dangerous threat to peace. And Warmbier is due to fly into Cincinnati tonight, Tuesday evening, but he is in urgent need of medical care. And, of course, there are still 3 Americans being held in North Korea, and the State Department says it's talking to the regime there about them as well. Brett?
Benjamin Hall live in London. Benjamin, thank you. Up next, some confusion about new proposed regulations on where cameras and reporters can go on Capitol Hill. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 5 in Atlanta, authorities search for 2 inmates who killed 2 Georgia prison guards during their escape this morning. Investigators say the men disarmed the guards, then shot them to death in Putnam County. Both men are serving long sentences for armed robbery and other crimes. Fox 25 in Oklahoma City, where the manhunt continues for a second day for 4 men who escaped from jail early Monday morning. 3 of those men were serving time for property crimes. The 4th was convicted of murder. And this is a live look at Boston from Fox 25, our affiliate there. The big story there tonight, the defense rests in its case in the trial of a Massachusetts woman accused of manslaughter for sending her boyfriend dozens of text messages urging him to kill himself. Michelle Carter is accused in the 2014 suicide of her 18-year-old boyfriend, Conrad Roy III. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway. Food poisoning has killed at least 2 people and sickened more than 700 at a camp for displaced residents of Mosul, Iraq. An Iraqi lawmaker is accusing a charity from Qatar of providing that tainted food. The Doha-based organization is not commenting. Qatar, of course, is being isolated by several regional neighbors for alleged support of terrorism and extremism. Erbil's police chief in Iraq says 7 people have been arrested in connection with this. Back here in the U.S., there was mass confusion today at the Capitol concerning the rules for media members in dealing with the U.S. Senate. Fox News senior Capitol Hill producer Chad Pergram is here tonight up on the Hill to talk about this. Good evening, Chad.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. This all started, Brett, at a hearing and a stakeout outside the Dirksen Senate office building for Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General who is testifying about appropriations. And what happened is you had somebody come out from the radio TV gallery and say, no, you can't be in the hallway anymore. We're changing the rules. Now, there is a rule book that we have here on Capitol Hill which dictates what the rules of coverage are. And technically, there's a rule that if you're going to try to interview a senator or you're going to try to stake out in the hallway, there has to be approval, first of all, from the radio TV gallery, or second of all, you have to get the approval from the Rules Committee, which deals with the rules of the Capitol and the Senate specifically, but also permission of that senator. Now, Richard Shelby, who is the chairman of the Rules Committee, put out a statement this afternoon and said, at no point have we tried to change the rules here. We're not trying to interfere with press coverage. Now, earlier today, or I should say last night, I tried to do an interview with a couple of senators about health care. Rand Paul of Kentucky and Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. They're very involved in this issue, and I stood outside by the Senate steps. And technically, I'm told that I was in violation because I didn't get the approval. But now we're told later on that things are going to be getting back to normal. Still, the Radio TV Correspondents Association, the RTCA, which is the group which represents reporters on Capitol Hill and the electronic media, they put out a statement that say that we are condemning this in the strongest possible terms. I'm told at the end of the day here, Brett, that this was really just a miscommunication. Senator Shelby is saying things are back to normal, but they are still reviewing the rules for press coverage. And part of this has been brought on by just the crush of reporters descending on Capitol Hill to cover senators at this very hectic news time.
Okay, Chad, we expect to see those walking down the hall interviews to continue. Chad, I appreciate it. Well, President Trump's crusade to ease federal regulations is taking aim tonight at a consumer finance watchdog created in the wake of the 2008 economic crisis. Correspondent Kristen Fisher tells us why the president is going after this particular agency.
The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, created by President Obama in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, is under fire from the Treasury Department. A new report accuses the Bureau, or CFPB, of regulatory abuses and excesses. It claims the Bureau has hindered consumer choice and access to credit, limited innovation, and imposed undue compliance burdens, particularly on small institutions. Now, the CFPB says we are reviewing the report. No comment beyond that at this time. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin is also taking issue with the Bureau's director, one of the few regulators that doesn't answer to a board and can't be removed by the president.
We think it's improper. We think it's also improper that this is funded out of the Fed. This agency should be subject to proper review and not subject to one person acting on their own.
When President Obama announced the Bureau's formation back in 2010, it was a blow to big banks and Wall Street.
From now on, consumers will also have a powerful watchdog.
Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren, who oversaw the formation of the Bureau, is describing these new recommendations as radical changes, ones that could potentially spark another financial meltdown. Quote, it comes as no surprise that Donald Trump and Steven Mnuchin, 2 men who were deeply involved in companies that cheated thousands of customers, would want to gut the agency that's held cheaters accountable and returned more than $12 billion to consumers. The Treasury report comes just days after House Republicans passed a bill rolling back many of the Dodd-Frank regulations that were also enacted after the 2008 crisis. It all adds up to a concerted effort by congressional Republicans and the Trump administration to deregulate the financial sector. Mr. Trump saw it as such a high priority that he ordered this latest Treasury report in one of his first acts as president.
Today we're assigning core principles for regulating the United States financial system. Doesn't get much bigger than that, right?
Now, that executive order also instructed Treasury to review 3 other sectors. So this was just the first of 4 reports. Many more changes could be in the pipeline. And according to Secretary Mnuchin, many of the changes proposed yesterday can be implemented through executive action alone. Brett?
Kristen, thank you. Secretary Mnuchin also says a government shutdown might not be such a bad thing. Mnuchin told the Senate Budget Committee today, quote, "At times, there could be a good shutdown." That echoes a tweet from President Trump last month after Democrats blocked funding for the president's border wall. Mnuchin says critical functions of government would never be shut down. Verizon is taking over Yahoo. Verizon has completed its $4.5 billion deal. It ends Yahoo's 21-year history as a publicly traded company. Yahoo's email and other digital services will combine with those of AOL and a Verizon subsidiary called Oath. The Dow was up 93 today. The S&P 500 gained 11. The NASDAQ finished ahead 45. 2 Virginia Democrats vying to be the face of the resistance to President Trump are squaring off in today's gubernatorial primary. Former Congressman Tom Perriello is running as a liberal crusader who has the support of national Democrats such as Senators Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. He's on the left of your screen there. Lieutenant Governor Ralph Northam is also vowing to fight the president, but says he will work with state Republicans to move a progressive and realistic agenda forward. We'll have those results later, as well as on the Republican side. Frontrunner Ed Gillespie is trying to fend off underfunded but spirited campaigns from avid Trump supporter Corey Stewart and State Senator Frank Wagner. With all of the focus on Capitol Hill about changing health insurance and getting quality health care around the country, one particular group is often left out of specific discussions: children. Dr. Kurt Newman is the president and CEO of Children's National Health System here in Washington. He's also the author of a new book that can help families facing hospitalizations. As many of you know, our family knows those anxieties well. I spoke to Dr. Newman earlier today. Dr. Newman, thanks for being here.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
This book is great. Healing Children, A Surgeon's Stories from the Frontiers of Pediatric Medicine. Why did you write this book?
I wrote this book because I've been a surgeon for over 30 years, and I wanted parents, and it's really for parents, but people in general, to know what I've learned over that 32 years, the special value and priceless value of pediatric medicine, children's hospitals, to help parents advocate for their children and to help our country understand the special value of pediatric medicine.
So full disclosure here, obviously we're friends. Paul, our son, has had multiple surgeries at Children's National, and you are the president and CEO of that hospital, also one of Paul's surgeons. So this book is very personal, but there are personal stories in here that help negotiate, help parents really find their way through if they have a sick child or they're just interested in children's hospitals.
That's right, and one of the goals is to help parents understand before they're in those situations so that they know where the emergency department is, they know all about pediatric anesthesia, they know all the special things that I've learned, so that when they get into a situation, they're more comfortable, they know the questions to ask, they can be an advocate for their children.
The Secretary of Health and Human Services, Secretary Price, visited Children's National, and he kind of had a message about what they are thinking. And how did you interact with him?
Well, it was a terrific visit. He's an orthopedic surgeon. He's obviously comfortable in hospitals and has had a long career in medicine before he ever got into politics. And that's where we connected, because I think he understands the special value of children's hospitals, pediatric specialists, what we can bring. And it was very, very inspiring to see him connect as a physician as well as a leader, and to help our team understand that special bond between doctors and patients, nurses. So it was really an inspiring visit.
I mean, that's what it comes down to, that personal relationship and how you deal with your situation with the doctors you're dealing with, as these lawmakers are working on retooling healthcare, health insurance in some way. What's the message that you have for them?
Well, the one thing I really worry about is I haven't heard much conversation about children in all of these debates. And I think it's such a smart investment, a wise investment, to actually put more into children's health as opposed to any cuts. I think we really need to think about that. So I would tell the lawmakers, if I had the opportunity, to really think about children differently, to think about investing wisely in our children, whether it's research, whether it's the hospitals, whether it's the physicians.
I know it's always fun to see the book out, and today is the day it's out. So congratulations. You've got all kinds of reviews, including yours truly, here at the bottom, and I highly recommend it. If you had one message for somebody looking for this book, what would you say?
Well, I would say buy the book, read the book, because you want to do what's best for children. And I think our parents want to do what's best, our country wants to do what's best, and I think it's all in this book. And these inspiring stories of children will just get you going.
That's true. Dr. Newman, congratulations. Good luck.
Thank you so much.
Again, the book, Healing Children, out today. Children's National, by the way, one of the best children's hospitals in the world, right here in Washington. The Jeff Sessions.
Let me state this clearly, colleagues. I have never met with or had any conversation with any Russians or any foreign officials concerning any type of interference with any campaign or election in the United States. Further, I have no knowledge of any such conversations by anyone connected to the Trump campaign. The suggestion that I participated in any collusion, that I was aware of any collusion with the Russian government to hurt this country, which I have served with honor for 35 years, or to undermine the integrity of our democratic process, is an appalling and detestable lie.
And that is probably why the Attorney General decided to testify publicly in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee, a forceful rebuttal of accusations that he met with Russians in some effort to collude for the Trump campaign. We'll begin with the panel. Steve Hayes, editor-in-chief of the Weekly Standard, Mercedes Schlapp, columnist for the Washington Times, and Tom Bevan, Real Clear Politics co-founder and publisher. Tom, your thoughts of this hearing?
I thought Sessions was very passionate and sincere in his defense, and drove a stake through the heart, another stake through the heart of the collusion argument, which is like an undead, animal walking around. There's no evidence, and he, I think, forcefully argued that again today. So, all in all, I thought it was a spirited defense by him, but I don't know that it's going to convince anybody any Democrats, anybody who thought that there's collusion or obstruction. He probably didn't change any minds in that regard.
Let's put up one of the other questioning moments with Senator Wyden and his former colleague, the Attorney General.
We also were aware of facts that I can't discuss in an open setting that would make his continued engagement in a Russia-related investigation problematic.
Senator Wyden, I am not stonewalling.
Mr. Comey said that there were matters with respect to the recusal that were problematic and he couldn't talk about them. What are they?
Why don't you tell me? There are none, Senator Wyden. There are none. I can tell you that for absolute certainty. You tell, this is a secret innuendo being leaked out there about me, and I don't appreciate it.
Mercedes.
Goodness, what a strong performance by the Attorney General. And I have to say, Comey did miss that email that was sent from the Chief of Staff of the Attorney General over to Comey saying this is why Attorney General Sessions is going to recuse himself from the Russian investigation. Obviously, Wyden was trying to show this discrepancies between Comey and Sessions, but I think Sessions came up with the upper hand here in basically explaining, I did provide him with that email, that information. Obviously, he didn't see it. And so I think those people who are watching out there are looking at the Democrats trying to build up this narrative about the Russian collusion with Attorney General Sessions. It's basically, I think that he was successfully able to stop that.
He didn't answer some questions of Democrats, and that was frustrating, much like it was frustrating in the NSA hearing and DNI hearing, where they said they were not going to talk about the conversations with the president. But that was pretty much the extent of the gloves on Sessions, wasn't it?
I think so. I think he was weakest in talking about privilege or refusing to answer questions and explaining why he was refusing to answer questions. He was also, I thought, relatively weak in trying to explain his role or why James Comey was dismissed and why the White House had given this sort of convoluted explanation that it gave. But overall, I think he was a very good witness for the White House. I think it was a good day for the Trump administration. And if you go back to that exchange that you just played, the James Comey comments last week, where he seemed to be suggesting that there was really something potentially big that he couldn't possibly talk about in an open setting.
It was definitely.
Well, look, it was one of the things that I looked at.
Yeah.
You know, coming out of the Comey hearings, wow, what does he have? He seemed to be suggesting that there might be really something significant there. And if it's the case, as Attorney General Sessions alleged today, or claimed today, that all he was talking about was a possible brush-by encounter at a public speech, that, I think, dents the credibility of James Comey in a pretty significant way. There had better be something more behind the kinds of things that James Comey was alluding to, or he doesn't look very good in this.
There is a serious side to not necessarily the collusion, because you're right, there hasn't been evidence of collusion, but there has been evidence of Russian attempts. Senator Klobuchar putting out a statement, "Free and fair elections are the cornerstone of our democracy. It is clear that a foreign adversary attempted to undermine election, and we're now learning that as many as 39 states may have been hit by Russian hackers," or attempts, I would assume. "This is unacceptable. As ranking member of the Senate Rules Committee, I'm renewing my call for a classified briefing for the committee on the full extent of Russian interference in the U.S. election system. As much information as possible should be made publicly available. We need to know exactly what happened to know how best to strengthen our election infrastructure and prevent it from happening again." Again, Comey testified, Tom, that there were no votes changed. Right. But this is more as far as the outreach and the attempts at these different states' election boards.
Yeah, Bloomberg reported this morning 39 states, something like that, the Russians tried to hack into. This is serious stuff, and it is bipartisan. Let's get to the bottom of it. But what we've seen in Washington for the past couple of weeks is not about that. It's about James Comey. It's about Jeff Sessions. It's about collusion. It's about obstruction. And so, look, I fully agree with Senator Klobuchar and others. But do it in a classified setting then. Let the special counsel proceed with his investigation. Let's stop the sort of public kabuki that is going on here and is all about innuendo and really isn't about that, which is a very serious matter.
There was another story, Mercedes, that was really shot down right away, and that was that President Trump was going to fire Bob Mueller, the special counsel. There was some talk about that, and then the Deputy Attorney General, who's in charge, was asked about that today. Take a listen.
At this point, have you seen any evidence of good cause for firing of Special Counsel Mueller?
No, I have not.
If President Trump ordered you to fire the special counsel, what would you do?
Well, Senator, I'm not going to follow any orders unless I believe those are lawful and appropriate orders. I can tell you, as long as I'm in this position, he's not going to be fired without good cause.
Could you be terminated without cause?
Yes.
And who would appoint your replacement as your position now, Deputy Attorney General?
The President.
So that's a possibility.
Anything's possible, Senator.
I understand.
I mean, love Senator Manchin, but it sounded like, so you're saying there's a chance. They can't say it enough. This is not the deal, and yet they're kind of going for the one more thing.
Right, and that's exactly it. They want to put it out there, the Democrats do, that Trump would want to fire Mueller. And that's also talk that you've heard from several of these Trump allies. For example, I think it was Rudy from Newsmax who came out and basically made some mention of it as well. So there's some of these individuals pushing this narrative about firing Mueller, which it's preposterous. That's not the case. And in fact, actually, Sessions State even mentioned the fact that he has full confidence in Mueller in this investigation. But there is talk out there in the conservative sphere in terms of Mueller being, tight-knit with Comey. Does that impact the investigation? And those are the questions that arise.
Well, I mean, we talked about it. Newt Gingrich raised this very issue. Others have as well. Mueller was interviewed for FBI director. And then, obviously, you have the testimony from James Comey about leaking the contents of those memos in an effort to get a special counsel as the end result.
Yeah, I guess I don't see the conspiracy there. I do think there are valid questions being raised about who Bob Mueller has hired. I mean, it is the case that he hired a number of prominent investigators and lawyers who have contributed overwhelmingly to Democrats. Those are fair questions. I would think that Bob Mueller might be concerned about the optics. But look, I mean, the story about Mueller potentially being fired has certainly been overhyped in the last 24 hours, but it didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, Christopher Ruddy was at the White House. He then went on television and said, I think the president might fire Bob Mueller. So
yeah, it turns out he was talking about an interview on ABC that he watched with Jay Sekulow.
But we only got that later, and the fact that Jay Sekulow wouldn't answer the question on Sunday, I thought was, you know, it's not a crazy notion. The White House has now walked it back considerably, and it was overhyped, but it didn't come out of nowhere.
I want to move on, but is there a chance that Capitol Hill moves on? I mean, when does the onus shift? I've asked this a couple times to different panels and different people. When does it shift? Does it ever shift to produce a there, otherwise we all need to move on?
I don't think so.
Bob Mueller.
Well, look, theoretically, in a perfect world, Bob Mueller comes out, absolves, well, with a decision that either absolves the president or
moves forward.
Yeah, exactly, moves forward with the investigation. And that is sort of the decisive moment. But I do think we've seen you know, Democrats, and part of this is because of the base of their party. They do not believe that Trump is the legitimate president. They want to see him removed by any means necessary. And so there was initially collusion, then we're moving to obstruction. Now we've got Democratic attorney generals of states suing on the emoluments clause. They're going to turn to his business dealings. So I think, even if Bob Mueller comes out with a decisive opinion one way or the other, this is going to carry on.
I gotta go. Next up, bittersweet news from North Korea. A surprising answer.